Welcome back, Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950, and a conversation here with the authors of a book called Veneer, Living Deeply in a Surface Society. Tim and Jason joining us from Atlanta. Guys, congratulations on the book. I know it's a lot of work to put it together, and I know that you put yourself out there, and all of a sudden you have many contributions from other people's ideas. And you're inviting that not just in the book, but you're inviting it on a website that you put together connected to the book called endveneer.com. And if I could, you suggest that this website is a movement of people who will not let society define them. It's a gesture toward celebrating our uniqueness and emotion away from ideas and things that promote the inflated world. And we certainly recognize, right, all of us, that we live in a world in which there are promises made that are come with much more of a wink and a nudge than a money-back guarantee, right? But what's the other option? I'm interested here. If you don't let society define you, well, then who does, right? If society, because it seems to me that society is like the largest collective grouping that we have. What's the other option? To pick to live inside of a closed religious community where you're not influenced by outsiders, or and who gets to be the one to dictate that alternative form of cultural influence if it's not broad society?
Well, yeah, Jason and I really are actually getting ready to move to a place similar to the Village in a Quaker kind of community where we're going to just kind of hold ourselves up and hopefully no one gets slaughtered.
I just threw away all my red.
Yeah, right. But I mean I think that's fun. But it really is an option, right? So there's Mennonites and there's Amish and there's Quakers who really have said, now hang on a minute, that stuff really does reshape you, and we're going to make our own clothes and we're going to grow our own food, and we're only going to use the tools that allow our community to be stable. We're not going to use disruptive kinds of ideas and tools and patterns and all that. Obviously, you're not suggesting that. I mean, you live in urban, suburban Atlanta, and you're on radio shows and all that kind of thing. So how does one decide where society stops and this call to live inside of a Christian narrative starts? Because I don't know that I can figure that out, this difference between society and the faith lived by the people of that society in a Christian way. How do you all think about that?
Yeah, I think, you're right. There is this other option where everyone packs up and moves to a farm and makes furniture. And sometimes when I look at my inbox, that sounds like a really great idea.
Right.
But that has its own set of problems, and any society is going to have things it has to deal with in its own way. That's why we suggest, or for us even personally, as we work through the idea, it came back to a very personal response to the problem.
Oh, good.
So it came back to this idea that, hey, I see this. Jason Losey sees this in culture. Jason Losey sees this in his life even, and in his relationships with his family and with his friends and with God. And so how does Jason Losey deal with this, and how does Jason Losey navigate this? And that's what we're calling people to do. We're calling people to check their motives. We're calling people to check their selfish desires and see what's going on inside, and then let that manifest out and live where you are.
Yeah, great. And I think that's helpful for people to know that this isn't a prescription kind of book. This is the kind of book that invites people to consider what they're up to in their lives and how they want to organize their lives. And I think you guys do a nice job in the book of saying there's this disconnect for people between what they want and the life that they live at the end of a week or a month or a year. It doesn't seem to match up. And you're trying to ask some questions about why is that?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
Well, just to the first part of that, back to the prescription of the whole idea, we were struck with this idea that if we were to recommend something that you do, if we were to give you a prescription for this, then that in and of itself would become its own veneer. That would be something people would try to do and say, look at me, I'm not veneer. And it's like, well, maybe you are if that's why you're doing it.
Yeah, and I guess I'm assuming that people might know the word veneer, but it's a term that's sort of used to be used in furniture, and I hear it used a lot now in teeth. Right, there's that whole thing about where you can have a veneer put on over your teeth, and it gives you those really kind of strikingly white sorts of teeth, that are almost unnaturally white, and they're quite common, right? That people would have these kinds of veneers on there. How did you pick that metaphor for this? Why did you pick the metaphor of veneer?
We had been talking. Tim and I had been talking about this idea for a while, And I went out one day to Home Depot and paid like $700 for this shelving unit for my garage. And, of course, you got to put it all together, right? So halfway through Saturday afternoon, I'm banging on this thing with a hammer and cursing under my breath. And, it's right. Atlanta in the summer, so it's hot. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, what a piece of junk that I bought for $700.
Yeah.
All it is veneer.
Uh-huh.
And I remember texting Tim, veneer, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, nice.
The whole world operates this way.
Yeah, and also with that, like in those discussions, there was the whole idea of inflatedness, things people trying to create things, or even in the church world, which is where I kind of do a lot of my work in writing. You really see it there as well, and kind of clothed in the name of relevance.
Yeah,
where you see things inflated to a certain thing, and it just kind of fits. Like, we want to look and feel successful, like the world says, and it's easy to put on, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, Tim. Talk a little bit about that. We only have a couple minutes left here, but isn't it intriguing that you have this story of faith and Christianity in the Bible that's all about kind of a gritty, down in the dirt kind of reality, but then churches so often want to communicate a story that's only of success, right? Yeah. Only of success. Like, you can't in many people's religious experience, you can't really doubt, you can't be angry, you really have to curse under your breath and not out loud. Like, all of that kind of thing. Isn't that intriguing that religious organizations, institutions, churches that tell the story of authenticity have this real sense of religious veneer?
Yeah, no, that's one of the main things we talked at later in the discussion, that we do have this faith that is based on really, we're created to be these people that are patterned after God, right? And we have this beautiful narrative with God sending Christ, right? So he's like a pursuer. He loves humanity, so he sends his son, is the story, right? So we can be redeemed. And then he takes those things, the hard things in our life, and then those hard things, those scars that we're embarrassed of, that we veneer over, they become beauty marks through redemption.
Yeah.
And what happens in churches, then we want to kind of, we want to push that down. We want something that's nice and beautiful and that feels like going to the mall or whatever. And then you don't have a sense of trust or authenticity. And I hate using that word, but I mean, being authentic isn't just like sharing like everything out loud like at 100 decibels. It's about having relationships and gaining trust with people, so that you can then start peeling off the veneers and saying, like, hey, this is who I truly am. And the Christian faith really should be about that. It should be about not necessarily celebrating those things, but saying, it's okay to be that, because God made you the way you are, and He's also provided a way for you to experience victory over some things maybe that you're struggling with or whatever. So it's really an odd thing, and that was one of the things we couldn't disconnect from the idea. Is like, our faith and even our church experience is really it's hindered by this, really.
Well, thanks. That's Tim Willard, and he's with Jason Losey. They've written a book called Veneer, Living Deeply in a Surface Society. And you can also pick up their conversation at endveneer.com. Jason and Tim, thanks for the book, and thanks for being on the show today. And happy Mother's Day to you.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day. Thanks.
All right, hey, we'll be back on Doug Badger Radio on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, here after the break.